finally, we get to Oedipus Tyrannos. And you notice I don't call him Oedipus Rex, because A, Rex is a Latin word, so it's not quite appropriate. B, he's not really your ordinary king.
Okay.
And for Sophocles, it's important that the title be something like Oedipus Tyrannos, because Tyrannos is such a loaded word. And you can see how loaded it is from this text that I take from Plato. What a weird way to start our conversation about Oedipus Tyrannos, by starting not with Sophocles, but with Plato.
Okay.
I have a reason for this, and that's because Socrates here, or better said, Plato's Socrates, is speaking about the psychology, if I may call it that, of the Athenian citizen, who of course is the best possible citizen in the whole wide world. And the question is, what happens, may I say it in a Freudian way, when the subconscious of the citizen comes to the foreground and the conscious goes into the background?
And that's possible in it's sleep, right? This is a context?
And so that's why we think of it as sleep. In other words, what happens when the democratic consciousness of a citizen of Athens goes to sleep? Then what kind of nightmares happen?
Okay.
Can I put it that way?
So it's a metaphor. It's a metaphor.
It's a metaphor.
Okay.
It's a metaphor. And I like the way that the part that we're now putting to sleep in this experiment is the rational part, the logistikon part, and the domesticated part, hemeron, implying that the other part would be wild, right? And in fact, Plato's Socrates goes into a riff about the beast-like and savage, wild side of, all right, here I'll say it, the psyche.
Right.
If I translated the psyche here instead of the more meticulously translated equivalents that we've done in the past, it may be a little bit simplistic, but you get the idea. And I did say, after all, we're doing Plato's Psychology 101. Anyway, when the rational part is asleep, this other part, you know, this beast-like and wild, savage part, what does it do? Well, it's glutted with grain. And so you think of maybe a horse that has had too much grain, and then what would a horse be dreaming when the horse goes to sleep, when it's overfed?
Okay.
Strange way to start. But then we switch to intoxicants, methe. Well, that's very human.
Right.
So again, Plato is mixing every kind of image that he can think of to express what happens when we've had too much to eat and drink, and we fall asleep, and does that overeating and overdrinking itself stimulate strange, undomesticated thoughts?
Okay.
Are you still with me?
Yes, I want to hear about this next one, bolting.
And then there it is. Then it starts bolting, and you see why he was saying earlier, overfed with grain, because he loves the image of a horse's nightmare, where the horse is not just jumping around, but bolting. And bolting is antisocial. It's what a domesticated horse shouldn't do. And there are interesting ways that novelists use this expression in English to convey the idea of sexual transgression, for example. So bolting is such an interesting word in English, but let's keep focusing on the Greek. But I did like my translation, bolting, because it is very evocative. And so what does this psyche do, if I can say it that way? Well, it seeks to push aside sleep. It's like, I don't want this to be a dream. I want this to be something that's really happening. And to satiate its own ways of behaving, which are the wild ways. They're the undomesticated ways, right? And when it is like this, it dares to do everything, released as it is from all sense of shame and thinking. It does not at all recoil from attempting to lay hands on his own mother in order to have sex with her. This is made very blunt. Or to lay hands on any other human or god or beast and to commit whatever polluting murder or to eat whatever food. And clearly, it's just too hard to say killing the father because there's so many taboos about actually saying it in a certain way. In Athenian civic discourse, you can't insult somebody else by saying father killer. It's that bad. And of course, how shall I say this? I'm tempted to say it the English way, which is also taboo, the MF expression. There are also taboos about that.
Right.
But those are almost not as bad as saying father killer.
Wow.
And then just to have a trifecta here, when Plato Socrates says eat whatever food, the idea is cannibalism. So let me sum it up the way Plato Socrates sums it up. In a word, there is nothing in the realm of consciousness, nous, and shame that it will not do. So I thought this would be a good introduction to how an Athenian citizen in the era of this particular drama, which is second half of the 5th century BCE, how an Athenian citizen would think about the mentality of Oedipus. The trouble is when Oedipus himself speaks, and Sophocles is very careful to stage this, he speaks like an Athenian intellectual, a very rational one, except that he has these very irrational moments when he starts nearing this dark side that he's resisting.